As an architect, you've got to be very patient sometimes. This was conceived 12 years ago. It was conceived very quickly and in a very complete state. It's a very powerful location. Wedged between these two great monoliths of Victorian engineering, the simple form of King's Cross, the barrelled roof that comes to this great brick end, and the incredibly flamboyant and brilliant St Pancras. And they reach a point with a triangular space which has been transformed into a new public space. This building is a keystone at the northern end of the commercial buildings. Thinking about this building, it's in a context which is extraordinary, not least because of the remnants of the Victorian industrial heritage. You see the gasometers, very powerful skeletal structures long since out of use, of course, and now to be absorbed within housing. And it became, in my mind, a way of drawing a building to the context that spoke both to the continuity and the future, but also back to that past. The idea was to build an external frame that would support structurally the building within, that would have something of that gasometer scaling. The other part of it was to create a skin that had a muscularity that was to do with joining materials together. One thinks of riveted beams, welded beams. This is not a building where you build a total frame and clad it. You have to build this floor by floor because the external frame is carrying the load of the floors, so it is built section by section. One is looking for a very rational structure, the lightest possible structure to do its job. That leads to a certain configuration of beams, and the concrete has to be supported at its edge by the external frame. Most structure is kind of contained behind a skin. Here we want to express the skeleton. So the skeleton comes to the surface and the structure is exhibited and has a certain haptic quality, particularly in the wonderful splicing plates with the rivet heads. Part of a world of shipbuilding and engineering that, of course, is very evocative of what our Victorian forefathers created. The idea has been, above the topography of the ground, to create the stability of a supporting belt of structure, which we call a vierendeel, that takes the weight of the building above and develops it into a wider spacing of structure coming to the ground. And rather than it being a blank wall to a private reception, the landscape should be allowed to penetrate the building, to run underneath the building. And so it is, we have a large depth at the front of the building, which the public can use. A little like a proscenium stage. And the 27-metre span is a representation of that theatrical drama. The steel, which is particular because it doesn't need to be maintained, it forms a crust very quickly, is resistant to further corrosion, and that crust has a wonderful patination and colour in its rust redness. This gets better with age, like a flower that's developing the entire skeleton, changing colour miraculously to a stability of its final form. And actually, the way in which rain hits it will create a surface texture that is very particular to orientation and its position. But it will have a unifying, absorbent quality of deep richness. Architecture has a different scale to sculpture sometimes. This is sculpture in a way, but you could never fit it in a gallery. The construction is manifest on the outside, and the great thing with weathering steel is one doesn't need to contain it and cover it.